Hi guys, welcome back. We are on Saxon Algebra 1. We're on lesson 28. I'm absolutely delighted to be talking about this lesson today because we are going to be talking about fractional parts of numbers and functional notation. For the big one, it's going to be, fractional parts of numbers. The things that I want you to write down in your notes today, along with all the examples that I do, right, is the word of means multiply. Multiply. The word is means equals. Okay, why is that important? Well, let's take a look at this first example and we'll just launch right in. Example number 1, if you're following along at home, I'm on page 117, 28. It says 3/4 of what number, oh, the word what, that was the other one, sorry. I knew I was gonna remember something. The word what means X. Means our unknown. Okay, so now really example number 1. 3/4 of what number is 69? Okay, well, 3/4 of means multiply. What number, what means X, is 69. All right, so we basically have an equation here. We don't have to multiply, we don't have to show that dot, right? It's just X. There are two ways that we can solve this equation. Now, we're multiplying 3/4 times X. The opposite of multiply is divide, but we don't divide by fractions, right? We never divide by fractions. We instead multiply by the reciprocal. And the reason why is, and remember the reciprocal is just flipped around. This cancels out with this cancels out with that, and I have X all by itself, okay? However, if you do it on one side, you gotta do it over here. 4/3. And just a reminder, we can turn anything into a fraction by putting it over 1. So then we have X equals, now let's do some cross canceling before we do anything else. 9 plus 6 is 15. 3 goes into 15, so 3 is also gonna go into 69. So let's look at our calculator. We got 69 divided by 3 is 23. So if I cancel this out and get 1, over here I'm gonna be left with 23. So now downstairs I just have 1, right? So I don't need to worry about that. 23 times 4, let's do 23 times 4, and we end up with 92. 92. So that was the first way that we can solve these. Another way is, I'm gonna rewrite that X equals 92. We'll write it like this right here. All right, so the other way is the same, I'm gonna do the same problem here, and we're gonna do 3/4x equals 69. Okay. That X is like over 1 and we're multiplying. So really that X gets boosted up to the top. Like 90% of the time it gets boosted to the top. It's not until Algebra 2 that we talk about it when it's in the bottom. So this, like I said, anything can be turned into a fraction by putting it over 1, right? So what I have now is a fraction equals fraction, AKA a proportion, right? Fractions are really just ratios. It's all the same thing. So ratio, when you're comparing two ratios, it's a proportion. When I have fraction equals fraction, I love that because we can cross multiply. Now do not confuse this with cross canceling. Cross multiplying only occurs when we have an equal sign. Back up here, cross canceling occurs when we have multiplication. Cross canceling is just taking 3x times 1 is 3x equals 69 times 4. That gives me 276. To get that X by itself, we're currently multiplying. The inverse is to divide. When we do that, these cancel out, but what I do to one side, I've got to do to the other. X equals 92. 92. So there's two different ways of doing that, okay? Multiply by the reciprocal or cross multiplication. All right, so let's look at number 2. What fraction of 40 is 24. So this is example number 2. What fraction, so that's X, of 40 is 24? So X times 40, well, to get that X by itself, we're gonna do the opposite, which is divide. Divide, these guys cancel out, but what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. X equals, now these guys, we can cut them in half, right? Or divide by 2. Divide by 2, I get 12/20. I can cut those in half again. I get 6/10. Cut that in half again. I get 3/5. So X equals 3/5. And remember, it asks what fraction, so it should stay in fraction form. And it only goes into decimal when we start it with decimals. All right, so example number 3. 2.5 of 2.5 of 240 is what number? 2.5 of 240 is what number? And remember, what means x. All right, so we're gonna do some multiplying here. Let's first turn this into an improper fraction. So that's gonna be 5 over 2. Just a reminder, 2 times 2 is 4, plus 1 is 5. We keep the denominator, times 240 over 1. I can turn anything into a fraction by putting it over 1. 240 cut in half is 120. Divide that by 2, I get 1, right? So now what I have is 5 times 120 upstairs. And then downstairs, that's 600. And then downstairs I have 1 times 1, which is over 1, but I'm not going to do that because there's no point, equals x, okay? If you ever have something over 1, make sure you reduce it down. Like if you had 600 over 1, make sure it says 600, not just 600 over 1. All right, any questions, let me know. Otherwise, great work. We will now, we're going to talk about functional notation. Functional notation. Let's say we have y equals mx plus b. This is the equation of a line, and we'll get more into this, okay? The variable that's in here is our x, right? So you're going to start to see your y's are going to be replaced with things like this. F of x equals mx plus b. F of x is really just a fancy way of saying y. You'll see f of x, you'll see h of x, you'll see, yeah, those are usually the most popular ones. G of x is the other one. You'll see these guys, okay? Equals 3x plus 12, right? So it's just a fancy way of saying y. The reason why that this is important, let's talk about one of these examples, is like here, okay, we have h of x equals 2x to the third minus 3. They want to know what it is when h to the negative 3 to the negative 3. Well, you see we're replacing the x with a negative 3. You're going to do the same thing in this equation here. 2, and instead of x, we're going to put in negative 3 cubed minus 3. Okay? H of negative 3 equals negative 3 to the third power is negative 3 times negative 3, which is 9, times negative 3, which is negative 27. 2 times negative 27. Do not do 2 times negative 3, that's negative 6 to the third power. That's wrong, but I see that happen all the time. All right, so negative 27 times 2 is 54, negative 54, minus 3, right, 27, yeah, 54, okay, making sure. Minus 3, but and we got to bring this down, h to the negative 3 equals this. Add the opposite, we get h to the negative 3 equals negative 57, negative 57. So anyway, this is just a fancy way of saying y, but it's a way of plugging things in. So speaking of evaluating, okay, let's look at example number 4. Example 4 says x squared, quantity x squared minus 3x, if x equals 2. All right, guys, when it looks like this, I'm going to give you the best advice here. Particularly if you have a negative here. This doesn't really apply because this isn't negative. So we'll go ahead and just plug it in, right? 2 parentheses 2 squared minus 3 times 2, okay? Order of operations, we want to do this guy and that guy. So we're going to get 2. That's going to be 4 minus 3 times 2 is going to be 6. Add the opposite there. We get 2 times, this is going to be negative 2, which equals negative 4. Negative 4, okay? Let's see about example 5. Now we're going to do the same thing, except this time it says f of x equals x squared minus 3x if f of x, or I'm sorry, f of 2. So f of 2, okay? Well, that just means that we're going to go and plug in 2, just like we did before. 2 squared minus 3 times 2, right? We're going to do this and this first because of our order of operations. F of 2 equals 2, 4 minus 6. F of 2 equals 2 times negative 2. F of 2 equals negative 4. And so this is how it needs to be written in your homework. so that you're showing each of your steps, right? And you're ordering things out. All right, so now for the next one, example number 6. This one is good because it's got a negative. X squared, 2x minus 1, if x equals -2. Guys, if you have a negative here, you got to be real careful when we're in here. In fact, what I advise you to do is take anything with parentheses in here. We're going to change those to brackets. Change those to brackets. Now your next step is to replace any variables here with parentheses. So bubbles, brackets, 2 times our bubbles minus 1. Now we're going to go fill in -2, -2. Here's why. I can't remember if I had you write this in your notes, but if I haven't, you need to go back and do this. -3 squared, this doesn't have anything to do with this problem. I just want to give you an example. -3 squared is the same as saying -3 2 times. -3 times -3, which is +9. -3 squared is saying, hey, do this stuff first, 3 squared, which is 9, and then slap a negative on the outside of it, okay? Do you see the difference between those two? One is positive, one is negative. This is why it's really important that you use your parentheses, okay? You will get the wrong answer otherwise. So come back up here, we have -2 squared, which is going to be +4. Brackets, we're going to do this multiplication here. That's going to give us -4, and we're going to bring this down, -1. We're going to add the opposite. So we get 4 times, because again, the operation here, if an operation isn't shown, it's assumed to be multiplication. I think like 90% of the time. I can't think of a time that it wouldn't be. -4 and -1 is -5. So 4 times -5 gives us -20. Notice how I've laid this all out. That's how you need to be doing it on your assignments. Make sure that it looks just like this, okay? None of this cramming it into 2 lines, absolutely not. You need to be working your way down, okay? 7 is the same thing, but you use -2. All right, so let's talk about on page 119, you're going to want to do the practice problems A through F. Go ahead and pause now and then come on back. 4/3 of what number is 64? 4/3 of what number, of means multiply. What number, what means x, is 64. All right, so again, we have fraction times an x, right? So we can multiply by the reciprocal, which is 3/4. Multiply this is over 1 times 3/4. On this side, these guys cancel out, and I'm left with just x, but what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. 64 divided by 4 is 16. I'm all worried about, yeah, it's 16. Divide this by 4, I get 1. Divide this by 4, I get 16. So downstairs, I have 1 times 1, which is just 1, right? Upstairs, I have 16 times 3. 16 times 3 is 48. I don't know why I had to double check my math on that. So x equals 48. For B, 3 1/5 of what number is 48? Okay. Again, we have to turn this into an improper fraction first. 5 times 3 is 15, plus 1 more is 16. So 16/5x equals 48. Since we're dealing with fractions, I'm going to make it 48/1. All right, we're going to multiply by the reciprocal, 5/16, because then this cancels out with this cancels out with that. I'm left with I'm left with x, and what I do to one side, I have to do to the other. So we've got, if I divide this by 16, I get 1. Divide this by 16, I get 3. X equals, downstairs 1 times 1, don't need to worry about that. Upstairs 3 times 5, which is 15. All right, that was for B. Let's do C. What fraction of, what fraction of 60 is 48? All right, we want to get that x by itself, and the opposite of multiply is divide. Divide both sides. These guys cancel out. I gotta replace my marker, it's driving me nuts. All right, so those guys cancel out, and I'm left with x equals 48/60. At the very least, we can cut those in half, and we get 24/30. We can cut those in half again. We get 12/15. Now, we can't cut 15 in half, but those are both divisible by 3. Divide that by 3, we get 4. Divide that by 3, we get 5. So the fraction is 4/5. 4/5. Get quick about breaking down your fractions, because reducing your fractions, because you're going to do that from now until forever. D is 4 1/2 of 220 is what number? All right. So again, we have to put this into an improper fraction. 2 times 4 is 8, plus 1 is 9 over 2, times 220 over 1 equals x. Divide this by 2, I get 1. Divide this by 2, I get 110. 110 times 9 is 990 equals x. On the bottom, 1 times 1 is just 1, right? Good. So for E, we have f of x equals x squared minus 3. Find f of -1. F of -1. Again, this is a negative, so we really have to use our parentheses here. -1 squared minus 3. Okay? -1 squared is +1 minus 3. So f of -1 equals, f of -1 equals, add the opposite, we get -2. -2. All right, so for f, we have g of x equals x. Let's see, x squared minus 3. Find g of 2. All right, so we don't have to be as scrupulous about our parentheses because there's no negative here. 2 squared minus 3, okay? G of 2 equals 2. 4 minus 3, because we want to do that, those exponents first, right? 4 minus 3 is 1. 2 times 1, right? 2 times 1. G of 2 equals just 2. Okay, that's going to be your answer. All right, guys, if you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, great work, and I can't wait to see you in class. I look forward to teaching you some more fun stuff. I love teaching algebra. So thank you, guys.